So in this video we are going to add the next debuff, or we are going to write the code for the next debuff, and the debuff we are going to create here is the poison debuff. So the poison debuff will drop some kind of poison on the ground, and the monsters that step over that poison will take some damage. So first of all we need to go into the poison debuff and write private, or actually we shouldn't do that there, we should do it outside the constructor of course. So we can write private float, and it needs to be tick time, which is going to look a little like the fire debuff, but there are going to be some difference, and we don't need to serialize the tick time actually. So when we have added the tick time, we need to make a float more and call it time since tick. So it needs to tick some times, and after a while it will drop those things on the ground. We need a prefab here, or yeah, let's make it private poison splash. And right now we don't have the right class, so we need to go to debuff, right click, add class, and write poison splash. And we need to remove it outside the namespace. Just remove the namespace here, simply just cut this and paste it here, and make sure it inherits from mono behavior. If you're getting an error, then right click and say using Unity engine here, so that we can use the mono behavior. For now we're not going to write anything here, but because we just added this, we will be able to go to our poison debuff and write poison splash. And this is the splash that is going to be on the ground. So this is our splash prefab. So this splash is going to do some damage when it hits something. So we're going to make an integer called splash damage. Okay, so the constructor here, well, right now it just has a target, but we will also need to give it a splash damage. We will have to give it some tick time, and we will have to give it a poison splash prefab. And well, I guess we also need some kind of duration, right? How long time is it going to stay on the target? And over here we need to give it the target and the duration. Now we have the constructor. So we also need to set these things, so we can say this dot splash damage equals splash damage, this dot tick time equals tick time, and this dot splash prefab equals splash prefab. So it's complaining about inconsistent accessibility. So I'm guessing that the poison splash here is a private class. Let's try to make it a public class, and then the error should disappear from poison debuff. Here we go. Okay. So nothing new here. How often do we need to tick? Or how much time has passed since last tick? How often do we need to tick? The poison debuff we need to spawn on the ground. We will fix this later. How much damage does it need to do when the splash hits some other monster, right? So we need to override update, and we need to make sure that we execute base update so that it runs all the code we have up here in the debuff. In the update it increases the elapsed time, so it will fall off at some point. If we don't do that, then the debuff is going to stay on the target forever. So if our target isn't null, same as in fire debuff, well then time since tick plus equals time the delta time. If our time since tick is larger or equal to time tick, or tick time, sorry, then our time since tick is 0, because we reset and we do some splash, right? So here we need to do some splashing. So let's create a new function called splash, and this function will spawn a splash on the ground and just execute it up here. So when when the tick time has reached, this is where the fire debuff will do damage. Well, then the splash debuff will spawn a splash on the ground. The splash that lands on the actual ground will have this poison splat script on it, right? So let's just go here, and then we can try to add the poison splat script. Let's see. Yeah, that's fine. We will fix this later. But go to Unity, and then we can try to create the splash. So the splash is just going to be a green splash, so we can just go to Sprites somewhere. Let's see, we can find the Sprites there, and go to Monsters and Death, and then find the green Death. And in here we can take any of these, because I think that these will fit perfectly for creating some splash in the ground. Or actually, I see that I already created one. So yeah, basically we have a splash sprite here. And if you don't have these sprites, then you have to create a splash sprite yourself. So I can see I actually already created a splash sprite. So let's use that. Just drag it onto the scene. So first of all, we need to scale it, right? So the scale should be 0.5 and 1 and 1. So this is the size of the splash right now. And besides that, it needs to have a box collider on it. So that it can actually hit something. I'm actually not sure if you want to put it 0.5. It's kind of large, so 0.5 and 0.5. It's very small. Anyway, let's just try with that size. We can always adjust it later, I guess. So it, yeah, looks better. Yeah. Anyway, you can see that on the splash sprite here, the collision box is kind of larger than the actual splash. Just to make it fair, we should make a little offset here and set the size a little smaller so it only encapsulates the actual green stuff here. You can do that here on the offset and size. What else? We need to set it as a trigger. This is our splash prefab right now. So go to prefabs and maybe projectiles and add the splash prefab here. Just rename it to splash prefab. That's fine. So now we have the splash prefab, and we can go to this arrow here, and we can return a new poison debuff that has some information. Let's see what it wants. Splash damage. Let's see. We actually need to add some things here to the poison tower because it's kind of empty right now. So the poison tower also needs the information or these fields that this poison debuff has. So we need to make a private float called tick time, and we need to make a private poison splash called splash prefab, because this needs to be passed on to the projectile, right, or to the splash. And then we need to make a private entity called splash damage. Then we can serialize this field and serialize this and serialize this. So now that we have these, we might have to be able to access them somewhere else at some point. So basically the splash damage needs to be turned into a property where we can actually get it, and the time tick also needs to be turned into a property where we can actually also just get it. And remember, you can right click and say encapsulate field, or you can just write this code here. So we need to make a property for splash damage and a property for tick time, but we have already done this so many times now, so you should know how to make these. So let's get on with this. The projectile from the poison tower needs to create a new debuff, right? And that poison debuff needs to give some splash damage, some tick time, a splash prefab, and a duration, debuff duration there, and a target. So now this poison debuff has the right uses the right constructor, right? And if we save and build, it should disappear this error here, and it did. Okay, so now that we've done that, we should be able to spawn this debuff at some point. Let's see. We need to go to the tower. Let's see. Let's just try to find the tower prefab here and the poison tower, and it needs to add a wait, it's sorry, it's on the range here. Let's see, we have splash prefab here. Well, we need to write splash. Let's just find it instead then. So we go to projectiles and splash prefab. Oh, and we need to click on this one, add component. It needs to have the splash, poison splash script on it, because our tower here has asked for splash prefab. So now we should be able to click here and write splash. Oh, okay, doesn't work. Let's just go to projectiles then and do like this. So now it has a splash prefab on it. Splash damage and tick time needs to be set. So let's set the splash damage to 5 and the tick time to 5. Attack cooldown, let's do it to 5. Debuff duration, where do you have that? That's 5. Damage is, well, 10. And the proc chance, right now it's 100. Let's leave it at 100 because we need to test if it works. And I think that's it. Okay, so let's try to place a poison tower and see if we forgot anything. If we forgot to create something. Let's see if it wants to play this game here. Poison tower. Let's go. Let's see. Shoots. Let's see if it drops some poison before it dies. Let's just let's try to put the damage to 1 here, so that it doesn't just kill the monster. Let's see if it has that debuff. Oh, wait, did we actually write the code for spawning it? I'm not sure. Let's see, poison splash, yeah, okay. Good job, good job. Of course we didn't write that code, because I got distracted by the poison debuff here, and we didn't write the splash here. So we need to execute the splash thing, of course. Sorry about that. So let's go to our poison debuff, and in here we should write some code for splashing that thing. So poison splash temporary equals instantiate. I should be game object dot instantiate splash prefab. So we need to instantiate the prefab, and we need to give it a target. The target is target dot transform, and yeah, actually I want to put it at target transform dot position, and then the rotation is quaternion dot identity. So when we have done that, we have to set the damage. So we can say temporary dot damage, and I can't reach the damage here. Let's see, this poison splash, and I guess we haven't written anything here. No, we don't have anything in the poison splash yet, so we will have to do that. So let's go to the poison splash and make a property called damage, and we can get and set the damage. And let's go back here. So temp.damage equals, and that should simply be splash damage, right? So the damage of the poison splash we're spawning on the ground gets the damage from the tower that spawns the debuff and everything. So if we upgrade the tower later with higher damage, it will pass this damage on to the debuffs and to the splashes on the ground that it lays. So one thing we have to do here is to make sure that the monster that spawns the poison splash on the ground doesn't collide with it. If it collides with it, then that's a problem, because it will keep spawning these poison splashes on the ground, and it will just remove them itself because it triggers it and it takes more damage from the poison it just stripped on the ground, right? So we need to say physics physics 2D dot ignore collision target dot get component collider 2D and temporary dot get component collider 2D. So what does this do? Well, it ignores collision between the target, which is the monster, and the poison splash, which is temp here, right? Ignores the collision between those two, so the monster that drips the poison on the ground doesn't collide it with it itself, so other monsters can hit it. So with that done, we should be able to spawn these poisons on the ground. Let's try again. Poison, poison, there we go. It does 1 damage, so it should just hit the blue monster. And let's see. And there we go. You can see there's little poison splash prefab here on the ground. We can zoom in. It's a little blurry, but it's there, right? So okay, I agree. It's very, very small. So maybe we should just do this at 1 and 1. Let's see how large it is. It's still a little blurry, but I don't know, maybe let's keep it at that scale. And the collision box, well, let's try to see how large it is. Nah, it's still fine. So maybe this is better. It's still a little large. So you can always adjust this, right? Let's try again. So right now, if we play the game, I scale it all up. If we play the game, let's try in full screen actually. And I place 1 tower here, and it fires at a monster. The monster will drop that poison at some point. And there we go. So there you can see there is this poison. If you're annoyed about the fact that it's not censored, then you can take the pivot point on the sprite and move it to the center of the actual sprite here. Anyway, if I play again, then this monster spawns. And nothing is actually happening when it triggers this one, and when it moves over it, you can see nothing happened, right? So we need to write the code for triggering the poison splash on the ground. By the way, when I said center the splash, I didn't mean that it will center the splash right in the middle of the tile, because it will drop the poison at the position where the monster is. But right now it drops it a little to the right of the monster, because the splash pivot point is on the top left here. This is the standard top left on the pivot on the splash. And this pivot point will be on the center of the monster, because the monster has a pivot point in the middle. So if you want to fix this, I guess you could go to the splash sprite and set the sprite editor and select the pivot point here, the circle. And then simply just, if I could select it there, and then move it to the center of the splash and apply. So that might fix the little offset it had. But yeah, that's a quick fix. Anyway, we were going to make sure that we could take some damage. So if you open up the poison splash, inside the poison splash, we will simply have to add a on trigger function. So make a void, it's my private void on trigger into 2D, and in here we write collider 2D other. If other.tag is a monster, so if a monster hits this poison, this just to make sure that projectiles and stuff doesn't collide with it, we say other.getComponent monster take damage, and element poison. And then we simply destroy this. So this is just destroyed. So we're not going to have that many of these, so I'm simply going to destroy it instead of trying to reuse it in the object pool. Okay, let's save this and jump back to the game. And let's give it one more spin here. Let's go. So the red monster spawns and he gets hit by poison. And he should drop some poison at some point. There we go. And let's see what happens when the next monsters are spawning. Let's try again, see when this pops up. So a new red monster, and he should have his health reduced when he hits this one. And he hit it and he got reduced. So of course he got hit by this one at the same time. But as you could see, he took some damage from it. And it disappeared. So that was the poison debuff. I hope you were able to follow. I went a little fast through some things because we had to do a lot and I don't want the video to be way too long. But yeah, that's how we spawn some poison splash damage. So we need to add the the frost debuff and the storm debuff, and I guess we will do that in the same video because they are not that complicated as the fire and as the poison. So thank you very much for watching, and remember to subscribe to the channel, like my Facebook page, and follow me on Twitter if you want more updates on all my videos. So thank you very much for watching, and remember that InScope Studios is a community found page and you can support me in different ways. If you click the link on the screen right here, you will be taken to a page where you can see where you can support me. You can support me on Patreon. If you do so, you will be able to get every single project that I've ever created here on YouTube, and you can also support me by getting one of my projects as a standalone product.